Hello, Internet. Welcome to episode 320 of the Assorted Calibers podcast. The second of the podcast is a little bit for everyone. I'm Weer'd, and with me tonight is the greatest hostess and really just an all-around wonderful person, Aaron Paulette. How you doing, Aaron?
I would like to dedicate this episode to the memory of Peanut and Fred. We aren't going to talk about them today. Right now, it's like the 48, 72-hour rule. I think we're going to talk about them next week, because we got some ways that applies. So, I just wanted to say that. Let's see. By the time listeners hear this, the election will be over. God help us all. So, on the one hand, we'll miss all the election stuff. On the other hand, potentially 1 to 3 months of people challenging the election and griping about it. And then, of course, regardless of who wins, 4 years of griping about the current president and half of the country calling it a fraud and not my president and so on and so forth. So, I'm really tempted just to take a nap until 2028.
I mean, it's one of those, like, my daughter is asking, like, which president do you like? And I'm like, you know what? Come to think of it, I don't like any of them. Really going back, like, really the one that was really kind of doing the purest job was George Washington. There's a massive painting in the rotunda of the Capitol that is George Washington resigning his commission as General of the Continental Army. And it's one of those, like, wow, like, because, like, nobody thought he was going to do it. Mm-hmm. Like, people just thought, like, all right, congratulations. We are now no longer part of England. England has surrendered. Now what? Well, now what? You had, you congratulations. You've got yourself King George. And, nope, he didn't. He resigned. He was president. He was president for only 2 terms. Like, the whole, like, 2-term thing was just kind of well, that's what Washington did. He did 2 terms and then retired. So I guess that's what we're going to do until FDR suddenly just said, I'm going to do it till I die. And then they went, you know what? Maybe that's not a good idea. Let's do a constitutional amendment.
You know, something that I haven't understood, but honestly, I've never cared enough to do research on it, is I wasn't clear on why a presidential term was 4 years when I would have thought 5, a nice round 5, because it'll either be half a decade, or if you get reelected, it's a full decade. We wouldn't have to be doing this overlapping things. It would be, we get a presidential election on the 5 and the 0.
I mean, that would make sense. The only thing that I can think of is that they've always been on the leap year. And so I'm blaming Ben Franklin. That seems like a very Ben Franklin to say, you know, it's the leap year. We could do it every leap year. Tell me that doesn't sound like Ben Franklin.
You're right. It sounds like something Franklin would do.
But yes, we don't yet know, because this is, we're recording this on the Monday before Election Tuesday, and I hope to all of our listeners in the future that you know who won, because I'll be really dreading it if it comes next Monday and we're still, like, discussing who's going on and who's recounting and whether it's on the level or not. Ugh.
So, hey, I've got a story to tell, and because it's an Aaron story, it's going to be short. But last week, Halloween hadn't happened, although I mentioned that by the time it dropped, Halloween would have happened. And so on October 30th, I was walking the dog with Mom, and I saw one of my neighbors who was putting out Halloween decorations because, we had to take them down for the hurricane. And was putting them back up. And this neighbor had a thoroughly excessive amount of Halloween decorations. And by that, I mean, think of Christmas decorations when you look at them and you go, wow, that's quite a lot. I wonder how many hours it takes you to put up and where you store them. She had that amount of Halloween decorations, including like half of a skeleton rising out of the ground that was something like 4-5 feet tall. It was just, wow, I thought I liked Halloween, but, you've got me beat. And so I walked past and I talked with the lady there who was setting up the decorations with her sister and, talked a bit. And I said, and I promise I wasn't trying to invite myself because you know how not a social person I am.
I do.
I basically asked, do you do this just because you love Halloween? Or are you going to have a Halloween party? And she said, both. Do you want to come? And I was like, okay. Because, I am kind of getting a little stir crazy. And also, anytime I can wear a costume, that's cool. But it's been so long since I've done Halloween. Where are my costumes? And, I've gained some weight. I don't know if they'll fit me anymore. And this is last minute. And then I thought, I have some camouflage that I bought, as it turns out, literally 10 years ago, because it was on sale. Not that I do any hunting, but just part of the preps. It's like, who knows? I may need to hide in the woods. And I got some on clearance, and, I got a suit of like spring mimicry, and it was not just the pattern but the 3D, and then I got like a poncho that was a darker like brown, sort of like trees, and it's got the 3D stuff, so it's like a ghillie suit, although a ghillie suit is a lot more with the heavy string sort of Cookie Monster thing. This one was a lot lighter and cooler, which is necessary in Florida. And I go, you know what? I know where those are. I bet they'll fit me. I mean, it's not the greatest costume in the world, but I'm still dressing up. Okay, so I found them easily, put them on, still fit. And then I have a thought, and I go, because I'm looking, and the debris from the hurricane hasn't been picked up yet. It's been 3 weeks, and according to the news, only 5% of the debris has been picked up, because I'm guessing there's a lot of it. And so people have trees in their front yard with the leaves dying and turning brown, which is kind of fall, which is nice. And I go, and yeah, my costume did match the down foliage. And so when people asked me what I was, and because the poncho had sort of billowy sleeves so I could kind of do a ghost thing, I would go, I'm hurricane debris! 3 weeks and only 5% of me has been picked up! And, you gotta know your audience. The kids didn't care. The adults thought it was hilarious.
Especially since so many of you probably all have like sore backs from like cutting and lugging and cutting and lugging.
Oh, yeah. So, it was effective costume for them. There weren't any prizes, but I got a lot of appreciation for it. I will post some pictures. They aren't pictures of that night, but like I said, when I got them 10 years ago, I took some pictures, and it looks really neat. So that's what I did for Halloween. Did you do anything cool for Halloween, Weer'd?
I just went out with trick-or-treating with my daughter, which is always cool and fun, and she is hardcore. She's a girl after my own heart, especially since she planned on all right, we're going to go out and around and make sure that it's at least after 9:30 when we get onto our street, because that way we'll hit every house that still has the lights on our street, and they'll be ready to go to bed, and they will just give me all their candy and go to bed. Which is exactly what happened, because literally they would come out, they would look up and down the street, and there was nothing. It was just deserted, and they're just like, here, take it all.
Isn't your daughter like 12 or 13 at this point?
She is 11.
Okay,
but 12 or
right,
13 is the like number of pounds of candy we have.
Okay, because I was thinking she was maybe starting to get a little too old for all of that candy, but no.
Oh, I mean, I think I was trick-or-treating like well into my late teens, because it's just one of those, number one, dress up, number two, lots of candy.
Okay.
So, yeah, there'd be a bunch of us. We would all gather up with our costumes. We'd all go trick-or-treating around like an area that we'd all usually actually go back to my place and just fall asleep, and then get up in the morning. My folks would make breakfast, and then my friends would find their way home. But and there was one house you were talking about, the person with the trick-or-treat direction and things. There was this one house. It was actually one of the first ones we hit. It's an old colonial salt box with a carriage house, and they have just ridiculous amounts of decoration, like, skeletons and animatronic stuff. Like, they had one thing which was like, I don't know if it was supposed to be like a Harry Potter Dementor. I mean, it wasn't quite, because there was like definitely a skull head inside, but essentially it would like pick up an animatronic young girl, and its eyes would glow. Smoke would come out of like the girl's mouth, and there was a fan, so it was getting pulled into the mouth of the skeleton. So it was sucking the soul out of her, and her eyes would light up green and then fade out, and then the body would go limp, and it would put the body down and then go into the reset phase. And just like me and a buddy were standing there while we're waiting for our kids and they have their whole driveway set up as a haunted house. And so me and a buddy are just standing there while the kids are going through the haunted house, just watching this thing, going, man, that is really elaborate. How much do you think that thing cost? Like, and they use it for just one night, because they put up the house was decorated, all October, but it wasn't until Halloween that all the serious hardware came out. And it just there were some people that definitely did it all out. We just had, like, my daughter put out like these little dollar store cauldrons that she put LED lights in to light up, and there was a pumpkin where she decided, instead of carving it, she just completely covered it with googly eyes, which was awesome. It was a Shoggoth pumpkin. So yeah, and I will say, Aaron, that I will take advantage to say, I say you're the nicest person in the world, in the fact that, like, I had my colonoscopy last week. You were very discreet on what's going on, but I'm gonna jump right out in front of it, because
very mindful, very demure.
Yes, I am. I'm telling the world. And and as I planned to do the show, like, all right, I'll get back, it'll be fine, and all that. And my wife's like, you're not going to be in a condition to do that. Like, they're not letting you drive. Why do you think you could do a podcast? And I'm like, oh, all right, Aaron, maybe we'll have to cancel. My wife's saying that I'm not going to be well enough to do this, and we'd already postponed it until Tuesday, because Monday was the clean out night, and believe you me, I would not be able to do a podcast. there was definitely a lot going on, and so yeah, so I'm like, okay, and you were great enough saying, let's just do a round table. I'll bring in the Dodd, and you guys did a great job. It was really fun listening to the show, and I will also let everybody know that Aaron told me that David had probably sworn once in the show, so I needed to listen really closely so I could bleep it out. And I may have listened to several sections twice, because I'm like, how did I miss it? And at the end, they're like, I don't think anyone swore, did they? Let's just tell Weer'd he did. I'll tell right now, if you are of that age to get a colonoscopy, I'll say, do not be afraid. It was not that bad of a deal. It was my doctor put me on a low fiber diet for the week before, and once I got my head around that, because I love, like, fresh fruits and vegetables and salads and things like that. I'm like, oh, and popcorn. It's just, they were taking away all the good stuff, and I just started cooking British food.
Oh no!
I was having fun. I made Welsh rabbit. It was delicious, and but yeah. So that part wasn't all that bad once I figured it out. I just decided, I was just like, pretend I'm a college student. You can eat chicken fingers and French fries. You're fine. You'll live. And then the The actual fasting part wasn't all that bad. I drank like all the chicken broth in my house, but that went over pretty well, except for like the hours just before we went to the procedure. Like I'm sitting down in my office watching cooking videos, and my wife's like, "You're torturing myself." I say, "It's pretty much pornography at this point." I can't eat, but they're making food and it looks good. And and so went in. And the procedure itself is like it didn't exist. Let's just say they gave me propofol. And so literally the anesthesiologist, he gave me a little bit of lidocaine because he says propofol's irritating on the veins. And they got me into position and he says, "All right, I'm starting the propofol. You should feel a little bit of pain in your hand." And I said, "You know what? I am feeling a little pain. Is this going to hit me pretty soon?" He goes, "Pretty soon." And then, "All right, congratulations. You did a great job." There was no "I'm falling asleep." There's no "oh, now it's hitting me." Nothing. It's just I was awake. I mean, I wasn't even asleep. I was awake the entire time, and the procedure never happened. And the one downside was, and the big reason I'm so glad, Aaron, you did the show without me, was I woke up with the worst hangover that I have had like since college. I think I've had some worse hangovers when I was drinking some really, really cheap garbage in very, very large quantities. But I just was wobbly. I had a thumping headache. I just did not feel good at all. Luckily, I wasn't nauseous, but it just wasn't great. And I will just say that that another thing to remember: if you go and undergo any procedure and something seems off, call the doctor up and let them know. And the drug that I was on that I think was bothering me, they gave me a nasal cannula with glycopyrrolate. There's another name for it, and it's not given on this site. I think this is, I don't know, but it's I think we got talking, and they think the anesthesiologist maybe gave it to me because I was getting over a cold, so I had a bit of a cough, and that was going to get rid of the cough. Gave me horrendous dry mouth, but I think that was also what gave me the hangover. So I will make sure that I have that drug on the tip of my tongue when I go in for my next one, which they snipped 3 polyps, so I'll be going back in 3 years instead of 5. Yeah. So that was that, and I'm glad they snipped those because I have a history of polyps in my family, but no history of colon cancer because I have a history of polyps in my family. They keep cutting them off too fast; they don't grow into cancer. Hooray! So colonoscopies, do them. They're not that bad.
But you know what is bad, Weer'd?
What is bad?
Actually, I suppose I should attempt to be hip for the kids and say that it is cringe.
It might even be sus.
Yes. So apparently, okay, well, obviously there's a game called Fortnite. I don't play it, but I've heard of it. I'm not that much of a social recluse. But apparently the Harris campaign decided that the best way to appeal to young people playing a game that, for people who don't know, Fortnite it's an online battle royale, shoot 'em up, and there are guns, and the campaign decided, hey, we're going to make a custom map and not let anyone use guns.
Yeah.
Because, we're running on anti-gun, and so we're going to completely neuter the fun of this game. And so, okay, this shouldn't be considered a political endorsement or whatever. It's more a case of, we're talking about Second Amendment rights, and we decided to put the boot in because this was just so dumb. So this was a map called Freedom Town.
Ironic.
And, yeah. And, well, also ironic is that it appears to be set in New York City because there's a picture of the Statue of Liberty, and we all know how much New York City cares about individual freedoms per indecision. Anyway, to give you an idea of just how popular this map was, so one of the most popular established maps had a peak during this period of a little under 324,000 people. How for Freedom Town, a maximum number of 383 players have used it. So popular.
That's almost 100 times less players.
It's just, oh, wow. Who thought this was a good idea?
I mean, so this was a phenomenal idea. Fortnite is like one of the most popular video games right now. I also have not played it, so yeah, old man, go ahead. But
yeah, but you at least have a child who's in the age range. I don't know if she plays it.
She does not play it, but she is very, very well aware of it because all the kids in her school, there's a lot of them that play it and talk about it and all of that. And so it is a super duper popular game. Making your own map is a really, really good idea and all that. Like, it would be a way to reach out if done properly. And all of this is if done properly. There's there's all sorts of things that can backfire on this, and boy did this backfire, because again, like, I understandably I haven't played the game. In this article they are talking about there are evidently some maps that also don't have guns, but that's the first I've ever heard about it. Like, every gameplay that I've ever seen of Fortnite has been essentially battle royale, one way or another. You are killing all the other players. So yeah, I mean, and I know when it first came out, there was a big, like, the big contest was what was it? Player Unknown Battlegrounds, PUBG. There was like which one? These two games were both really, really popular. I think PUBG was a first-person shooter. Fortnite's a third-person shooter. But either way, they were large map battle royale games being played out, and they were so as the different people were going, okay, cool. Here are these two games, and people are vying for, it's kind of a VHS Betamax type war. And I guess Fortnite won because I haven't heard much of PUBG in a while. So yeah, this would be a very, very brilliant thing because there's a lot of eyeballs. I mean, again, just one map was getting, over 300,000 people on it. Yeah, they're probably not all eligible voters, but they're number one, younger kids may also be some influence on their on their fence sitting or non-voting parents, possibly. But there's going to be adults playing this game as well, so it would be great outreach. Except for, I have heard that this was kind of difficult to get a hold of because it wasn't set up so that it was right in like the main Fortnite lobby. Like, you had to actually seek that. You had to hear about this map through word of mouth and then actively seek it out. Okay, that's a problem. And then on top of that, it doesn't sound like it was very fun, because otherwise there would definitely be more than 380 players on this map.
Well, there's also the fact that, according to the article, the average age of a Fortnite player is between 16 and 24, and 16-year-olds can't vote. I know 18, and then there was something at one point that 17-year-olds could, but I don't remember if that's still a thing now. But my point being is that they're basically trying to appeal to people within a 6-year window. And I feel like this was a lot of effort and a lot of money for obviously very little gain.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I almost didn't do this story, and this is really the only story that we've got to talk about because it's been a pretty slow news week. But this is it's just, obviously he can't really use this as this is the final plunge and don't vote for Harris, because by the time you hear this, it's the vote polls are closed. It's all done. Either you made your decision or you didn't. But as far as it goes, it just shows you talk about like, we talked about a couple weeks ago about Tim Walz and his shotgun and just really not handling it like the avid hunter he claimed to be. But it was one of those, oh, I'm a hunter and a skeet shooter. Like you can still you can have your guns, but not for self-defense, but for, personal enjoyment, sport. It's fine. And you don't get much more sport shooting than a video game. Like there is nobody who's getting accidentally, there's no range. You talked about in the last episode about the stupid photo op where they were shooting at steel way too damn close and somebody got hit with some spall. It's that's a thing that happens. People will get hurt on range trips. You can, get a slide bite. Oh, have a slide close on a finger or an action, get grand thumb, spall coming back. There's all sorts of things that can happen. The guns are not the safest thing in the world. If you follow safety rules as a general rule, it'll be, injuries will be rare and minor. But there's never been anybody who's been injured except for maybe carpal tunnel disorder, for playing video games. Like it's harmless. And yet here's Harris is taking away the guns. Why? 'Cause it's gun culture. So many people get into shooting because, oh, I played video games. I played Call of Duty. And now let me learn how to do the Call of Duty stuff. So
I found it. I found what I was looking for. And thanks to Ballotpedia. And it says, in several states, 17-year-olds who will be 18 by the time of the next general election are permitted to vote in that year's primaries and caucuses. So that's where I was pulling it from. It's an edge case, but it still does exist.
Okay.
That was driving me crazy, and I just couldn't leave it unaddressed.
So yeah, I think we've done that to death, but it just shows the level of anti-gun that they will stoop to, is that even Aaron, I know you had your GI Joes, and I guarantee that your gun owning military veteran family did not take the guns away from your GI Joes. But did you have any friends in school who had GI Joes but were disarmed GI Joes?
No, because at the time I was playing with them, my father was still active duty military, and so I grew up on military bases.
Gotcha.
Or like when we moved back to the States, we'd be living in the civilian town that surrounded the base. It still had a real strong military culture. So, I mean, it was something that I heard about on the news, but no, never experienced myself.
Yeah, no, I had some friends that lived up the street. They were actually probably the closest kids my age that were boys. Had some neighbors that were family of all girls, so I would occasionally play with them, but mostly I was playing with other boys when I was young, and they had a far bigger. I never got that big into GI Joes. They had far more extensive GI Joe collections, but their mom was like, "No, you're not playing with guns." And I remember being in their room with all the GI Joes set up on a battle line, and we were taking Pez dispensers and putting markers down into them and using the spring of the Pez dispenser to launch them like missiles into the enemy lines. So
yeah, there's just something about boys. Even if you take away all the guns, they will pick up a stick and go pew pew, or turn it into a sword or something. I don't know if it's specifically genetic, but you cannot completely demilitarize the XY chromosome.
I don't think it was Jay's son specifically, but I remember Jay Grazio was telling me a story about seeing a kid pick up a doll and shoulder it and go bang bang bang. So yeah, the what a doubt. I killed a lot of kids with a stick.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's people know that's a reason why I think that we need to have gun safety taught in schools, because just that innate, everyone's is knowing about guns. They watch movies, they see TV shows, they see posters, they see comic books. Like, you're not going, no matter how much you try to shelter your kid, you're not going to be able to shelter them from guns and gun culture and violence as a theatrical thing. And so they're just going to know about them. But if you keep them completely in the dark and ignorant about guns and the real guns, because of course, you're talking about, G.I. Joe and Hollywood movies and that sort of stuff. Those aren't real guns. That's pretend. That's make believe. But then if those kids get their hands on, or video games, but those kids suddenly get their hands on a real gun, you handle things differently than you would in a video game or in a movie. So I think it's super important to have gun safety in schools, just so kids don't find themselves in that dangerous area with an unexpected firearm.
Mm-hmm. And, even if you don't want your children to know how to use a gun, I mean, none of our listeners, but I've said this before. Oh, we don't want people to use a gun to hurt other people. What if your kid finds a loaded gun? Don't you want them to know how to make it safe? But that's a sermon I've preached 100 times. You all know it.
Yes.
Abstinence-only education does not work.
Yes. Or what if there's a kid that's playing with a gun, and all that? Don't you want your kids to be as horrified as they should be and want to get the hell out of Dodge, go find an adult, go run outside, go call the police? Something with if there's a kid who's playing with a real gun, no, you stop doing that. And if they don't stop doing that, get the hell away from it. Like, this is dangerous. This is bad. Don't just stand there and go, oh, I want to play next, because God forbid somebody catches a bullet. And speaking of gun safety, of course, Miles and I were down in Tennessee with Oddball and David and company. And there was, I don't know, a couple dozen people, all shooting guns, some of them machine guns and things like that. And the number of injuries was, as far as I know, Oddball cut his finger on his Altor.
Oh, no.
Oh, no. Yeah. It was gushing actually pretty good, but Miguel Gonzalez got him a Band-Aid.
How did he manage to cut himself on a gun?
It's the Altor.
Yes, but I was asking for the mechanism of injury.
I'm trying to remember if it's just the fact that there's just some rough edges on the frame, or if it was he got his finger pinched on the barrel. I didn't catch that part. I just saw him showing somebody how to use the Altor, and he was leaking, and I knew that. All right, hope if you don't know that you're leaking, you're gonna realize it when you wipe blood all over one of your guns, and that's never a great thing. So I don't know. The Altor is a pile of garbage, and it is one of the more painful guns that I've ever shot. Like, I actually shot Jay's, Jay had his snubby from hell there, and it's one of those, it'd been years since I'd shot that. I'm like, oh, Jake, old time's sake. Yeah, go ahead and load it up with, and I still had some of my hot 357 loads in my range bag, and I loaded up with that and, let those go. And yeah, that was painful, but not quite as painful as an Altor. It's a light little gun with it's just not put together right. It's just, I want one so bad. But while we were road tripping, Miles was mentioning that much of the ammo for the blog shoot he acquired through a service called Ammo Squared, and he's happy to tell us all about it.
Hi, this is Miles with another episode of the Southpaw Corner. And in this episode, I'm going to be talking about a website for purchasing ammunition that handles things slightly different than some of the others. And that company is Ammo Squared. It is a company where you set your budget, and each time period, they take that money out of your account and allot ammo to you. And then when you decide you're ready for it, you just go online and tell them, ship it. In this particular case, I did it for $25 a week of purchases, and every Thursday they'd take $25 out of my account and allot ammo according to what I had specified for that money. And I had 5 different types of ammunition being stored each week between 223 practice, 308 practice, 357 Magnum practice, 44 Magnum practice, and 9mm practice. And for signing up, I did also get a bonus of 75 rounds of 9mm practice ammunition. As the blog shoot got closer, I paid attention to how much money I had in the account, because it is free shipping over $250. Now they only ship full boxes, so let's say you had 55 rounds of 357 Magnum, they're only going to ship the full box of 50, or you can round up to, 200, which, if you needed to get the 250, that's a good idea. But what I did is I paid attention to what was coming up, and when I was ready to have it shipped, I rounded up a couple of the boxes that I needed to make the $250 minimum for free shipping, and had it shipped down to David's house. It worked out very well. I was very pleased with their service, and at the same time, I did do a comparison on what the different prices were a couple other online retailers were. And the ones I chose, just because they're ones I've heard of and I've heard good things about, so I was not afraid to use them as my sample, was Ammo Squared, Phoenix Ammo, Lucky Gunner, and then, of course, Freedom Munitions. Overall, Ammo Squared ended up someplace in the middle. On the 2 that are actually offered by Phoenix Ammunition, they were on the high end. So, as an example, the 2 that Phoenix Ammunition offered were 9mm, where Ammo Squared was at 28 cents a round. Phoenix Ammo was at 37. Lucky Gunner was at 24. And Freedom Munitions was at 27. So, just a couple cents more per round from Ammo Squared over the cheapest, which was Lucky Gunner, is a 4-cent difference per round, which isn't bad. The other one that Phoenix Ammunition did was 223. And again, they were the high one at 59 cents at Phoenix Ammunition, but Ammo Squared was at 51, Lucky Gunner was at 46, and Freedom Munitions was at 41. Now, the other 3 ones I did, which I said were, the first one was 357 Magnum. Ammo Squared had 57 cents a round. Lucky Gunner was 49. And Freedom Munition was the real low one at 40 cents. And then at 44 Magnum, Ammo Squared was the most expensive at $1.01. The Lucky Gunner was 75 cents. And Freedom Munitions was the low at 61. And then the last one, 308, 93 cents for Ammo Squared, 80 cents for Lucky Gunner, and 88 cents for Freedom Munitions. Again, not too far off. The only one that was really not great, as far as I was concerned, as far as pricing was concerned, was the 44 Magnum. But it could also be what they are getting. They were definitely name brand ammunition, full boxes from Ammo Squared. I have not gotten from Lucky Gunner or Freedom Munitions, so those may have been more of a generic or a factory reloaded type ammunition. I don't remember off the top of my head when I did the price comparison. I try to get similar things, so they probably were similar, but not always. Overall, I was very happy with the service. It was not outrageously expensive, and it was very easy to do. And I'm already building up towards my next shipment. And it just helps those of us who can't just go, like I said, buying a bag of ammunition from Phoenix, one, is more expensive. I do like their political way of dealing with things, but, that's besides the point. When they're, 10 cents more expensive, or 8 to 10 cents more expensive per round, it adds up quick. And, I can't just drop, $400 or $500 on a bag of ammunition at the drop of a hat. But being able to build it up over time worked out very well. Lucky Gunner and Freedom Munitions, a little bit cheaper on most, just a little bit cheaper on most of them. I mean, you're talking a difference of, 13 cents for the 308, 17 cents for 357, 4 cents for 9mm. And when I figured out these prices, I did not count in what the average price per round was if you figured out I had 75 rounds free. I did not count that. I figured that's just a bonus and I'm going to be happy with it. So, that being said, is it the cheapest thing out there? No. Is it good ammunition at a reasonable price that's shipped directly to my house and I don't have to worry about it? Yes. So in conclusion, if you're on a budget and you just can't drop large quantities at a time, this may be a great option for those of us in that position. If you have any other questions, please feel free to contact Weer'd or Aaron, and I'll be more than happy to help you out. Thank you, and have a great day.
I mean, this actually does seem really great because when I first started getting into shooting, and especially when I was much younger and much less financially stable than I am now, you get the idea of like, oh, I want lots of ammo because I want to shoot my guns all the time. But I want to get the best price. And you realize that, buying the ammo by the box is far more expensive than buying the ammo, by the case. But even though the unit price is different, the case is so much more expensive. And so that's a big nut to drop on it. You may not need to go back every week like you would buying it by the box, but it's still tough to do. And this kind of allows you to do the buying it by the box idea, and the fact that you're chipping in a little bit of money here and there, and then you're getting it essentially by the case, even though it's smaller, but you're getting it by the case prices. So this does seem like a nice service.
What it reminds me of is the old-fashioned practice of buying something on layaway.
Yeah. You pay a little bit every week, and they keep it behind the counter for you. And then when you're paid up, you get to take it home.
Yeah,
that is that's a fair statement.
Yep, I'm gonna have to look into this because, as I've said before, I enjoy shooting, but I'd enjoy it a lot more if the ammo didn't cost as much. And so if I can just put away a little bit every time and then, oh, hey, I magically have 100 rounds, I can go to the range.
Yeah, that's true. And Miles needs to get his CNR information filled out. And I told him he was planning on bringing it with him, and we just fill it out at David's place because David's got his CNR and I've got my CNR, and between the three of us, we could answer every one of his questions. But I told him, I said, yeah, just give me a call when you get to filling out the paperwork, and I'll walk you through it. It'll be easy. But and I say that because in Massachusetts we are you need a permit to buy ammo. So most ammo companies won't ship ammunition to an individual because of just I don't really know why. You can't put your gun permit on file with them. I think they just got scared by legislative action because a bunch of companies have not. I remember contacting Phoenix Ammo. Do you need to see my FFL? Nope. No need. We'll just send it to you. Okay, cool. But yeah, if you have a CNR FFL, it's no different than a gun shop in most companies' idea for sending ammo. So they'll just send it right to your house.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. How much does a CNR cost these days?
It's essentially $10 a year. It's $30 for 3 years.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah, it is far more expensive having it because that means that you could be browsing through auction sites, and if you see something that's over 50 years old or on the CNR list, you could be like, oh, I can just buy that and send it to my house.
Oh, it's sort of like how reloading doesn't actually save you money.
Yes, reloading means that you're shooting a lot more with cheaper ammo.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yeah. It's one of those things of I mean, you were aghast at some of the money that I've been paying for my 1891 Mosins.
Yeah.
But it's so easy because I'm just just send it to my place. Here's a copy of my license. And it's just so fun to just have a rifle show up at your door. It's even better having a handgun show up at your door.
Yeah. There's probably a funny way for me to do this, but I can't think of it. So, David reviews a new type of red dot site that he discovered at Goals, the PB3 Pandora, and PB stands for Pandora's Box.
Hi, and welcome to Gun Lovers and Other Strangers. Previously, I've gone over different types of optics and the methods and techniques for mounting and sighting them. In this segment, I'd like to talk about a specific product, the Pandora PB3 Red Dot Optic from Lead & Steel. This is another fruit from the GOA Goals Expo. While there, I got to meet Garrett Shuck, their director of sales, and some members of his team. They were more than willing to talk to me about their products. After the expo ended, I reached out and he agreed to send me an item for testing and evaluation. Not only did they send me an optic, they also included a riser adapter for use on any Picatinny rail-equipped firearm. The Pandora PB3 is a non-magnified, heavy-duty, large-window red dot optic. It has 7 daylight and 3 night vision brightness settings for the 3 MOA reticle. It's powered by a single 3-volt CR2032 button battery, which is capable of over 30,000 hours runtime, depending on brightness settings. The Pandora PB3 is available in both flat dark earth and jade anodizing. The one they sent me was jade, and it's a very attractive color. The PB3 can be ordered with any of half a dozen adapter plates, including Glock MOS, M&P Core, and CZP-10. Weight of the unit is 2.3 ounces, which is light for the size and durability. It's about 2 inches long, 1 1/3 wide, and just over 1 inch tall, or 52.5 by 34 by 30 millimeters. The objective lens is 22 millimeters wide by 17 millimeters tall and provides a nice wide field of view. Movement of the dot is via traditional windage and elevation screws on the right side and top of the unit. They each have 100 MOA range of adjustment, which should cover all but the most crooked mounting setups. Brightness is controlled by 2 buttons on top of the optic. Pressing either button will turn the unit on. Holding down the up button for 3 seconds will turn it off. The PB3 will remember the last brightness setting when power cycled. As with most other red dot optics, installation is done by loosening the mounting screw, positioning it on the crossbar of the ACRO mounting plate, then snugging the screw firmly without over-tightening. While the firearms industry and red dot makers haven't settled on a single pistol optics cut standard yet, there's a lot to be said for the aimpoint ACRO design. It's sort of like a low-profile Picatinny rail and is amenable to quick-detach bases. There were no issues mounting the unit either on the adapter plate for my Ghost 19 or using the riser Lead & Steel provided on my Smith & Wesson FPC. All shooting was done on reduced-scale B29 silhouette targets. After getting used to the adjustments, sight-in was no problem. The pistol only took 6 rounds, one of which was a flyer that was my fault. Once point of impact matched point of aim, I was able to put 19 more rounds into one largest hole at around 5 yards offhand. The FPC was even easier. At approximately 8 yards, all 25 rounds made one ragged hole. It almost felt like cheating. Due to the wide sight window and large field of view, I had little issue finding the dot on either platform. With some practice, I can see this being an extremely fast as well as accurate optic. The PB3 has many positive features. Mounting it to a firearm is quick and easy. It has simple controls. Adjustments are straightforward and positive. The battery can be accessed without removing the optic from the firearm. When removed and replaced on the same firearm, the sight maintained 0. Even with my astigmatism, I was able to find a brightness level that wasn't all flare and fuzz, and the unit appears to be extremely rugged. There are only a few things that might be considered cons. Lead & Steel elected to not include a shake-awake feature on this model. This does keep the price down and makes for a more rugged product. However, for use on a defensive firearm, I consider that feature something of a must-have. The optic could be kept on all the time, but that reduces battery life. However, at the advertised 30,000 hours of runtime, that adds up to almost 3.5 years. So this one might be a wash. For those not familiar, Shake Awake is a feature where the optic is in a very low power mode when at rest, but if moved suddenly, such as when drawn from a holster, it immediately switches to full power operation. After a set time of lack of motion, it returns to the very low power mode. While the Pandora seems a bit large, and some may consider it on the blocky side for handgun use compared to some of the other options currently available on the market, that's the price paid for a red dot that's designed to take the punishment of riding in a holster day after day. Finally, there's only one reticle configuration, and the dot only comes in red. The Pandora PB3 has an MSRP of between $350 and $630 based on selected options and accessories, which is actually quite a competitive price for a unit with the capabilities and features this one has. It all comes well packaged in a fitted foam-lined box and includes the optic, a battery, lens wipe, Allen wrench, and a QR code to access the user guide. For those like me who prefer a more traditional process, the manual can also be downloaded as a PDF via their website. As with all lead and steel products, the Pandora PB3 comes with a limited lifetime warranty, which promises the product will be free from manufacturing defects in material and workmanship, including electronics, under normal use for a lifetime. In case of failure, Lead and Steel will either repair or replace the product, determined by them, with a comparable product free of charge. Overall, the Lead and Steel Pandora PB3 is a well-designed, robust, relatively cost-effective red dot. It's certainly on my shortlist for future purchases. I'll be disappointed when I have to return the test unit. Late-breaking update. I sent Garrett a copy of my review and he let me know about some changes. Specifically their patent-pending Aura-Wake feature, their version of shake-awake technology. While in the circle dot configuration, the accelerometer only affects the outer 65 MOA ring but leaves the center dot illuminated. Since the ring is the biggest battery drain, this considerably improves battery life, but the dot is untouched. This configuration helps avoid potential failure points common with accelerometers and optics. The Aura-Wake feature is currently on their Promethean LP1 optic, but will be in future versions of the Pandora PB3. Finally, Garrett is no longer Director of Sales, having been promoted to Vice President of Lead and Steel. Congratulations, Garrett.
The Pandora's box in 3 MOA, or PB3 for short.
That about wraps up this segment. If you have any questions for me or suggestions for future segments, or a comment on a past segment, please post them on the Assorted Calibers Podcast Facebook or MeWe pages, and Aaron or Weer'd will make sure I see them. I'm also a contributor on the Blue Collar Prepping blog, which can be found at bluecollarprepping.blogspot.com. Finally, I'm a published author, and books with my stories can be found on Amazon under the names Brena Bock and David Bock. That's all for now. Thanks for listening. I'm David, and this is Gun Lovers and Other Strangers.
Yeah, recently, actually, we were down in Tennessee. The friend of the show with a common name had a suppressed Ruger Mark IV, and it had a Swamp Fox reticle on it. Swamp Fox red dot on it that had the reticle. And there was also somebody at my club shooting a 365 with that was a Holosun, and the red dots with the reticles. Oh, those are really easy to shoot because pretty much if you got the gun pointed in the right direction, you're going to see a part of that. Though David did add that the huge window on this Pandora means that it's like super easy to find the dot.
Yeah, I have recently, I don't know if I mentioned this on the podcast. I haven't mentioned it on the blog because I haven't tested it yet, but I very recently bought a Ruger Max 9 that comes with the integrated fiber optic red dot sight, and I'm enjoying it. I'm going to shoot it a bit more before I review it, but yeah, I do have that problem of where's the dot, because it's a compact or a subcompact. There's a very small window. I've got to get used to, okay, I've drawn, and where's the dang thing? So, from everything that I've seen from the pictures, the Pandora looks like it's got a nice, big aperture.
Yeah. And the fact that you can remove the batteries without having to re-zero the optic, that's...
Oh my god.
Super duper nice. I mean, granted... Well, the downside is, like, if you're going to switch the batteries out, I mean, obviously, you should probably plan them on a regular interval so that it's not like I just realized my optic is dead as I'm, like, putting my gun away at the end of the night. It's a So, then you could plan it around it on I got this, I got a day free. I'll get up in the morning. I'll change the optic, and then I'll kind of futz around with it down in the armory to get it so that it looks like the dot's pretty much in the center. And then I'll take it to the range and re-zero it. And you know what? Zeroing an optic isn't that horrible of a time. You're doing trigger time. Trigger time's fun.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, the idea that you could just kind of just do it is nice. And then it'd be nice if you could just have just a little chunk of uranium and just, you'll need to recharge it in 1,000 years.
Little chunk of uranium. Okay.
Allow me to have my goofy sci-fi.
Sure.
All right, to close out the show, last time I talked to our author Caleb Daniels, we were talking about the books of James Bond, but let's be honest, many more of us have watched the movies of James Bond, and we weren't going to leave you guys hanging. I am happy to welcome back to the Assorted Calibers podcast, author Caleb Daniels, author of Licensed Troubleshooter, The Guns of James Bond. How you doing, Caleb?
Doing well. Good to be back.
Yeah, and so, we have to go here. This is we're contractually obligated. If you talk about James Bond, we have to talk about the James Bond movies, because as popular as Ian Fleming's novels were, and they were absolute barn burners back in the day, they really did fly off the shelves.
Oh yeah. Well, JFK said that From Russia with Love was one of his top 10 novels of all time in a Life magazine interview. And that ensured the success of his books across the pond for generation.
But like many things go, there's people who are watching the Avengers movies who have probably never cracked an Avengers comic book and things like that. There are people who only know James Bond, Harry Potter's another one, through the movies. Mm-hmm. And so we have to talk about as blockbuster as the books were, the movies were even just magnitudes greater.
Oh, yeah. Well, you brought up the Avengers, which I think is an excellent point to bring up, because I think what people don't, especially of my generation, I'm 27, don't understand is James Bond was the Avengers level event of the 1960s and 70s. Thunderball is one of the highest grossing movies of all time. Goldfinger, when it came out, was the event akin to like an Endgame sort of film, where it was one of the most popular movies for a generation. It exploded. The Bond mania thing was excellent, and that movie definitely helped define an entire generation of people, and it was their pop culture. And so, yeah, in the same way that you might get into the esoteric world of comic books through watching one of the Marvel movies, the films are an excellent entry point into the world of James Bond, even if you've never stepped your toe outside of it. They're just great fun, and there's so many. And what I appreciate about the films, because we're over 60 years of cinema at this point with James Bond, they're all very of their time, which is great. Like, they're all trying to be cutting edge in the year in which they were produced, which means no matter how you're feeling, there's a Bond film to match the mood and to match the needs of the day, and a different actor with a different feeling. It's just so much fun.
And actually, just to tie the Avengers thing, and maybe I'm out of line here, because this just popped into my head. I really wasn't even thinking about that reference until I made it. But I'm pretty sure Nick Fury is himself essentially a hat tip to James Bond.
Yeah, it definitely has that feeling, especially back in the comic book era, where it's that, Shield, Spectre, like it has like the long acronym, secret agent kind of feel. Definitely, I think a product of that time.
Yeah, well, either a direct progeny of that, or maybe from the Mission Impossible, Man from U.N.C.L.E., those
Absolutely.
Sort of things
which all just spiraled out of the Bond mania world, right?
Correct.
Like all of that happened because Sean Connery brought this character to life in such an incredible way. Everyone was chasing the coattails and was very successful because of it.
And so I'll say let's start off with what we did in the last one, because I think we kind of have to, is what is your favorite Bond movie?
This is actually harder than the books, I'll admit to that. I'd say growing up, my favorite Bond film was definitely like a Goldfinger, and I think it's still up there. Thunderball is probably one of my favorites of all time, but the one that I put on the most often that has to me just the most returnability and rewatchability is From Russia with Love. Love the Cold War plot, love the depth of it, the villains. I just think it's a movie I watched a ton as a kid as well for that same reason. It's such a period piece. You go there and you get immersed in this world. And, that's obviously the second film that Sean Connery did. And you really kind of feel the second Bond movies, to me, are some of the best for each of the actors, because that's when they start figuring out the character and how they want to play them a bit more. And Connor just feels so much more at ease and From Russia with Love. And it's just so fun. But he's still super dangerous, right? Dr. No is a very lethal and intense movie. And it's very raw. And I think From Russia with Love builds on that, but then you get a little bit more of a nonchalant Sean Connery inside there. And I think it makes it a very appealing.
I absolutely agree with you on that, and I'll defer my choice for a little bit. The fans of the show probably already know this because I'm pretty vocal about my favorite Bond movie. It's pretty head and shoulders in my opinion, but it ties in very well with everything you said. I will say first up, Assorted Caliber's Pod, just a little self promotion. We're promoting your book, but we can also promote the ACP a little bit here. We have a Patreon, and one of the perks for the Patreon is the ACP film tracks, where we watch movies and essentially create a commentary track for a movie. So you listen to the podcast while you're watching the movie at the same time, and you'll get our insight. And we happen to have our ACP movie night within a day or two of the passing of Sean Connery. And so we dedicated that night to him. And the two movies we ended up watching were, From Russia with Love and, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade.
Oh, those, an exceptional way to celebrate the man's career.
Absolutely. Those are two outstanding. But yeah, I agree. Of the Connery Bonds, I really liked From Russia with Love. I think it is one of the best. And actually, so I actually want to kind of pivot a little bit off of this discussion. Sure. Again, I'll get back to my favorite one because it ties in well with this. Is that there kind of are, certainly, especially when talking the character arc of Connery as James Bond, there certainly is kind of a development of the essentially the pulp novel Bond that Ian Fleming was writing, and very much was kind of the character in Dr. No for sure, and definitely the character in From Russia with Love. We talked about in our last interview about the novels, is that Bond is absolutely an anti-hero. He's not a nice guy. He's very, very rough around the edges and very, very savage and brutal in a lot of his aspects. And you certainly had that appearing in Dr. No with, you've had your shots and then she essentially shoots an unarmed man in the back
and puts two in his back. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just, that was really, it's, if you follow classic films, especially from that era, the 50s and 60s, that was really, really brutal for the time. It may actually seem fairly tame and quaint, for modern movie viewers, that are going through, but there was definitely the early, certainly the Dr. No, From Russia with Love, and Thunderball James Bond was definitely, as close to the books as the 1960s Hollywood would allow.
Yeah, absolutely. And you actually get closer to the Fleming Bond as time goes on. Obviously, you get the Roger Moore era, which has some really great Fleming-esque moments inside there. But to me, Moore does a great job of keeping the character relevant during the 80s and the 70s in the same way that Adam West did with Batman. Very campy, very fun, matches the audience's needs and the pop culture moment very successfully. But then you get to Timothy Dalton, who's a Shakespearean actor, who was hell-bent on bringing back the character as they saw him in the novels. He read all the books, and he bridged the gap very successfully in The Living Daylights, where they wanted to kind of keep somewhat the tone that they had successfully produced throughout all of Roger Moore's films. That can be a little light. It can have little moments of ecstasy that you weren't expecting, like using a cello case as basically a sled, but he's pretty brutal in that
Mm-hmm.
film, and then he really doubles down on that in License to Kill, and that's well before the Craig era really leaned into that darker Bond one more time. But that's what's so fun about the franchise is you get a different Bond, a different actor, and a different feeling with each film.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, and it definitely is. Yeah, what is your current mood? What's going on? And again, I have definitely watched all the films, including the climax, miniseries and that sort of stuff, and they're all really quite amazing. And again, that climax Casino Royale, I believe the only place you can really watch it easily is on YouTube. I don't think there's anybody I don't think you can get like a DVD or a Blu-ray, and nobody's streaming it in a for pay site. So
no, the only place I saw it was back Pluto TV during the No Time to Die launch had a 24-hour James Bond channel, but it seemed like every time I turned the bloody thing on, it was Climax Presents Casino Royale. I'm like, oh, what am I going to watch today? Oh, man.
I bought a copy of the 1968 Casino Royale with Peter Sellers. In part because I actually had only watched like 20 minutes of it, and then I had to go somewhere. I was like going out with my parents, somewhere as like a teenager, and they're like, "Oh, it's time to go," and I turned it off, and I was just like, "Oh, this is so." I watched kind of the start of it, and I didn't see the end, and didn't realize how god awful it is. But I had read somewhere that some of the DVD pressings of that had the climax movie
interesting
thrown into it, and I was very, very disappointed when my copy showed up and it wasn't there. But if you want to see a very drunk, very, very defiant Orson Welles playing the chief and insisting that he do his close-up magic work that Orson Welles was obsessed with at the time, it's a very interesting piece of cinema history. But
yes, it is.
Yeah, you mentioned the different Bonds, and I will also say that Living Daylights is up there. From Russia with Love, Living Daylights are up there with some of my favorite Bond films whatsoever. And again, I do like the anti-hero aspect of Bond. I like the darker Bond. And so that actually gets to the aspect of my favorite one is Casino Royale, the Daniel Craig Casino Royale. I loved the reboot. I loved what they did with it. I love the fact that he keeps the Walther P99 that he had that was introduced in Tomorrow Never Dies. May I say that From Russia with Love and Tomorrow Never Dies are the two most realistic Bond films as far as the villain's plots.
I'm a big fan of Tomorrow Never Dies. It's a great film, and the story of the P99, I won't go long form or down the rabbit hole here, is probably one of my favorites in the entire franchise. It's one of my favorite stories we share in the book as well.
Yeah, that's really, really cool. But FYI, if you think that Ellison Carter's plot to stage a war so that he can sell more media subscriptions, may I introduce you to, speaking of Orson Welles, Randolph Hearst.
Mm-hmm.
Happened to be, and the Spanish-American War in the early 1900s was in fact the pretty much the exact same plot line of Tomorrow Never Dies. So Charles Foster Kane, Orson Welles is of course pivotal and magnum opus was an H. Randolph Hearst parody. He got several death threats, I understand, from that. So I really do like the aspect of the early Daniel Craig's James Bond movie, specifically Casino Royale. I like the fact that the modern film sensibilities is we're going to show things being really brutal, really dark, really bloody. As my dad said when he came back from the theater seeing it, and my dad was the person who introduced me to James Bond, was the fact that James Bond's knuckles are bloody and chapped. And it's one of those yeah, they would be. So the idea that James Bond's going to be marked up and beat up by the time the movie's over is absolutely exactly how it would have gone down in the books, but not something that you would show in Hollywood.
He gets brutalized. I mean, in the novel, Live and Let Die, his pinky gets broken during the torture sequence. the scene in Casino Royale with the torture in the chair is basically pulled verbatim from the introductory novel, which you talked about cinematography in the 60s. Yeah, so, the Casino Royale novel back in the 50s definitely would have been something that people were not expecting or prepared for at all. It's a book that has the exact torture sequence from the film with the cutout cane chair and, the brutalization of the character. And so the temperament at the time was not prepared for that, and definitely wouldn't be something that would have worked on screen at the time either. So it really did take until a reboot to bring that to life. I really do enjoy Casino Royale, like you mentioned. One of my dark horses, one of my favorite Bond films as well, is Quantum of Solace, actually, for that same reason, because I think it works really well as a fourth act to Casino Royale, but it really, to me, invokes the Fleming Bond and just the dark, revenge-driven, cold-hearted feeling of the character that people weren't prepared for in a very effective way.
Yeah, I could see that. Overall, I felt that the writer's strike was very obvious in that one, and
yes, the writer's strike is definitely a crux to that.
And I will say that Quantum of Solace is right up there with like The World Is Not Enough, and then do we count the 68 Casino Royale? I don't know, but in some of my least favorite of the Bond films. But like I said, even the bad ones, they're all worth watching.
Even Die Another Day, man. You got to sit through it, but
yeah, there's certain aspects of Die Another Day that I like as well, but it is definitely a weak film, and
it's just a CGI nightmare for me.
The CGI, the special effects are horrendous on that,
which is so disappointing, because one of the things that I think a lot of people don't know about the Bond movies are they really pride themselves on practical effects.
Mm-hmm.
Like, people have died filming a lot of these action sequences in the Bond films. On Her Majesty's Secret Service is a great example of just the crazy lengths that they would go to in order to film these scenes. There's skiing sequences in the film, and they brought in Olympic level skiers to carry a camera between their legs in a special harness while skiing backwards down slopes to capture those sequences.
That's crazy. So
stuff like that. It was definitely, it's the 60s. OSHA, not a real thing. So they really, really stepped out of the box and did some crazy stuff to not only do the sequences, but also to capture them. And so it always disappoints me when practical effects get removed, because I think that's part of the pleasure of watching a Bond movie, is realizing that, okay, yeah, this probably, if you did it in comparison to 2024 cinematography quality, it kind of looks a little plain Jane. But what you're watching is someone actually doing the thing. When Roger Moore's James Bond skis off the edge of a cliff and rips out a Union Jack parachute, that's a real thing that they did. They filmed that whole sequence.
Wow, they are really amazing. So I will close out on, do you remember I assume that your first introduction to James Bond was through the films, not the books?
Absolutely, yeah.
Do you remember the first James Bond film you watched?
It's a blur slightly, and that's only because my grandfather had purchased for me a box set of Sean Connery DVDs. So first exposure, that's also why I think Connery ranks so high for me. First exposure syndrome's a very real thing. My wife loves Daniel Craig because that was her first exposure to Bond. But if I remember right, the box set that I had was like Goldfinger, From Russia with Love, and I think, of all things, Diamonds Are Forever, which was fascinating. But yeah, I mean, those movies all together really pushed me on the journey of James Bond. That got me into the Scholastic coffee table book of all the Bond movies. So I was reading about all the plots before I'd even seen all the movies. And then about once a year, I'd get a gift from a grandparent. That'd be another one of just the one-off DVDs. And I'd add that to my library and would watch that. Or I'd go to their house and they'd have The Man with the Golden Gun, I remember vividly, on VHS. And I'd sit there and watch that. So these movies mean a lot to me too, obviously, because they were part of my childhood. They're really fun. And the return and rewatchability of them is very, very easy. And that's why, honestly, watching the films and reading the books was the easiest part of the research for Licensed Troubleshooter, without a doubt.
Yeah, I will say for my personal experience, I don't remember what my first Bond film was. It was definitely Sean Connery, because I remember as a very, very young kid seeing Roger Moore on screen and going, wait, that's James Bond? And my father explaining he actually explained the age story that was put out by the by Eon Pictures on why they had parted ways with Sean Connery for that was Live and Let Die, and but
you can't think too hard about that since Roger Moore was a senior by a few years. But
correct,
it's a good presser.
They had a very tough relationship, and
yes, they did.
I will note. I mean, also the same thing happened with Pierce Brosnan. He really kind of got fired well before he was interested in being done with the part. Daniel Craig was more than happy to be done with James Bond, and I think it'll probably do us both just not to discuss that, because I was that actually the oddball for the show describes the No Time to Die as the worst Bond film, of which I will say cinematically that is not true. I would say that the Quantum of Solace is far worse. I know you just said you loved it, but I think cinematically that movie is absolutely terrible.
I don't know if you've seen Diamonds Are Forever recently. It ranks pretty high for me in that aspect in particular, in terms of cinematography.
I haven't. I have seen it, but that's one of those ones that, like, I think the last time I saw it was like being like broadcast on like TNT or something, one of the Turner movie channels.
Yeah.
But yeah, the how that movie ends, I think, is really a black flag for the Bond films.
Oh, it's a gut punch. I was given a pass from a friend to a presser film, and I'm out of Kansas City, and I had to fly. I flew in. I red-eyed to Chicago, like 4 a.m. flight to get there, watch the film, and then immediately get on a plane like an hour later to go home. And it was quite the experience. I'm like, wow, that happened, and it was timed as a premiere, so it went out the same time as like the Queen and company were watching it overseas. So there weren't a whole lot of people I could talk to about what I had just witnessed, aside from the 2 or 3 friends that I had across the country that also had gone to press screenings. And I'm like, oh my gosh, we're gonna have to hold this in for like 3 weeks.
Even worse is the island at the end. I felt really, really harkened to the novelization, the novel. You Only Live Twice.
Yes.
Blofeld's castle in the.
Yep, the castle and the poison garden all pulled very heavily from that.
And it's one of those that was something that did make an appearance in the You Only Live Twice movie, but it's just one of those like, oh, what a terrible place to put such a great plot element.
Yeah, I definitely feel like that plot piece didn't get the justice that the novel provides it. Like the poison garden plays such an integral part of that whole book, and not to say that the set piece isn't gorgeous the way they did it, but I feel like the plot point of having the poison garden and what all that meant was kind of just a throwaway wink and nod versus like a well-articulated thought.
Yeah, it was a very, very interesting aspect of that book. I highly recommend that book for anyone who hasn't read it. But Daniel Craig was absolutely done. He wanted to move on to other stuff and didn't want to do another Bond novel or another Bond movie. And but Pierce Brosnan very much was not ready to go, and Pierce Brosnan has been very, very open that the movie that he did right after that, The Matador, was absolutely kind of a thumbing his nose at the Bond franchise. And I will highly recommend anybody who loves Bond movies watch The Matador and know that is a very, very begrudged Pierce Brosnan who is mad about being fired from James Bond, and it makes it all much better.
Got the short end on both ends, right? Because he was supposed to be Bond clear back in '87, but the Remington Steele contract got extended on the final day that it was due. He had signed his Bond contingent to not getting re-signed for Remington Steele, and they re-optioned him for that show. And so then he had to go watch, and he has interviews where he's like, so I went from being James Bond to seeing Tim's face on all these billboards. He's like, that's kind of a hard thing to go about. So he's the Bond to me that so effectively captured the essence of what the character was at the time aesthetically, who was underserved with quality plot.
I will agree with that. I will say that while I really do like Dalton and Craig for their closeness to the Fleming Bond films, I feel that Sean Connery's biggest blockbuster, you mentioned Goldfinger, which was really the start of the blockbuster Bond films. And that's where you get a lot of the things that are unique to the movies, the gadgets, the one-liners.
Yeah, they really solidified the whole Bond formula.
It became a lot more palatable for general audiences, and there's certainly something to be said about that. And I felt that Pierce Brosnan absolutely captured all the things that Connery did, but really kind of turned the volume up on them. And so, there's certainly something like that. But also, Connery, of course, had his issues with it. He was a nobody and had, really was just kind of starting at acting and became just a screen legend, but was getting stuck in a contract because he did the smart thing and signed a contract early on because, hey, I need money and steady money. And suddenly he was like, oh, now I could be making a lot more money. So there was a lot of contractual discussions between Connery and all of that. And that led to him parting ways and then coming back for Diamonds Are Forever. That was done in between the Roger Moore, but also in between that, Ian Fleming lost the rights to Thunderball, and I think it was Warner Brothers, wasn't it? Ended up buying it, and
and Kevin McClory. Well, Kevin McClory had the rights to it, so he was able to option that out, which is how Never Say Never Again happened.
And with that, like I said, I don't remember the first Bond film that I ever saw. And I think it'll be actually very, very clear when I say this, but the first Bond movie I saw in the theater for sure was Never Say Never Again in 1983, which that puts me at 4 years old. And my dad said that at no point did I sit in my seat for the entire movie. It was probably, it had to have been a matinee production, and I don't remember there not being that many people in the theaters. And I was just running up and down the aisle and swinging punches and yelling and grunting at the excitement of watching James Bond on that. And very clearly I remember the scene where Bond is fighting the guy in the health clinic, and of course this is a Sean Connery's in his 50s at this point, and they're openly pointing out that he is older, and so they're playing him as the aging spy, which I think is an absolutely wonderful aspect of the character. And he ends up grabbing a flask of something off of a lab bench and throwing it into the guy's eyes, and he just gets absolutely stunned by it, and Bond's able to win this fight that had been going on for ages.
It definitely drags on the screen.
And the punchline of that is he looks at the flask and sees, what the hell is this stuff that I threw in this guy's face? And it says James Bond, and it is a urine sample that was collected earlier on with the great gag from the I'm gonna need a urine sample from you. Could you fill this up for me? From here? And then she's across the room. And and I remember not being able to read at the time, and my dad had to explain that was James Bond's pee that he threw in the guy's eyes. And just like, oh, this is great.
It's a fun 80s movie.
Yeah, it's a fun 80s movie. It's a very, very interesting production, especially since they could only do aspects of the film. They couldn't touch on anything that was introduced into the movies. Very, very interesting movie in production. Sometime we'll do an ACP film track for it if it's ever streaming. So yeah, I think we've done that to death. You've all seen the James Bond movies. You know what we're talking about. And if you want to read a great, essentially companion book to the James Bond movies, as well as the books, Licensed Troubleshooter, The Guns of James Bond, there's links in the show notes, and you just go to Headstamp Publishing or Kickstarter and check that out. And that, of course, is written by the great Caleb Daniels.
Thank you for having me on.
So you started off with, what was it, cheesy sci-fi?
Yes.
And I resisted the urge to use that as a segue, but I believe I've said before that my first James Bond experience was Moonraker.
Yes, you have.
And it's a good thing that I saw it when I was in elementary school and therefore thought it was cool. Because if I had seen Moonraker as my first James Bond movie at at a more discerning age, I probably would have seen fewer of them. Because, I mean, I can't even say it aged poorly. It was just, oh my God, the cheese.
Yeah, I have mixed feelings about Roger Moore. I mean, he did have a really good time as James Bond, and absolutely looked the part. I mean, just absolutely dashing looking guy. But
I can't really blame Roger Moore. I blame the scripts, because when you give him good scripts, he is a good Bond. For Your Eyes Only was a really good Roger Moore movie. And so it's just sometimes the Bond movies of the 80s were crap. And the thing is, Moonraker, the movie, has very, very little to do with Moonraker, the book.
No.
And it was mainly because, oh, hey, it's the 80s, the space shuttle is a big thing, and there's a book with the word moon in it. Sure, why not?
Instead of it making it a World War II continuation with the V2 buzz bombs, we're gonna make it lasers and space stations.
Yeah.
Okay, sure. But there's a bad guy called Hugo Drax in both of them.
Yeah.
So, Aaron, what is your favorite James Bond movie?
Oh, I mean, I know you've asked me this before, and I don't remember specifically what I said. I think it's fair to say that I have a favorite for each variation of Bond.
Ooh, just run down them, because I mean, it's like kids. Which kid's your favorite?
Right.
And,
okay. So Sean Connery, to no one's surprise, from Russia with Love. I mean, George Lazenby really doesn't count. Roger Moore was... I'm pretty sure Never Say Never Again was the one with the deep diving suit and the Greek monastery on the tall mountain.
I believe that's Octopussy, which was the same year as Never Say Never Again, but Never Say Never Again was Connery.
No, okay, I'm blanking on the name, but it's the movie that came after Moonraker.
Okay.
For Your Eyes Only.
Yes.
Okay, that one, great. GoldenEye for Brosnan, and Living Daylights for Dalton.
Excellent choice.
And I mean, I admit, a lot of, the more recent ones, it's like the first ones are really good, and the other ones are okay. And of course, Casino Royale for Daniel Craig. So I really enjoy the first new Bond movie, and after that, it kind of peters out.
Yep. No, I'm with you on that. Though Skyfall was really good. But I 100% agree with you with the I think I put two. There's two exceptions in there. My favorite Roger Moore is probably Man with a Golden Gun, and him playing off of Christopher Lee, the great Christopher Lee, and then my favorite Brosnan is Tomorrow Never Dies, which, along with From Russia with Love, are the two most realistic Bond scripts. Yeah,
like you said in the video. Tomorrow Never Dies had a really timely plot, but I didn't hate it, but for some reason, I don't know, it didn't do it for me. It was like, oh, you got so close. It's you made this fantastic steak dinner and it's tofu? I'm not really sure why.
The reason why is because they totally did it backwards, and that Sheryl Crow should have been the closing credits scene, and Katie Lang should have been the intro.
I mean, I'm certain that's not the reason why, but...
Katie Lang's surrender, it would be a far better intro to Tomorrow Never Dies than Sheryl Crow's Tomorrow Never Dies.
What was that awful, awful Brosnan movie where you had... I can't even remember her name anymore, but she was hot for about 5 years in the 90s, and she played a nuclear scientist called like Christmas Jones or whatever.
Oh, yes, that was The World Is Not Enough, and that was... what's the actress's name? She's actually a great actress.
Denise Richards.
Denise Richards.
Yeah.
the former Mrs. Carlos Estevez.
But it was like, the moment they introduced her name, it's like, I see the pun. I know it's coming because she's a Bond girl. We know what happens. There it is.
They waited all the way to the very, very end, too, for it.
I mean, on the one hand, I was dreading it. On the other hand, that is the best payoff. So
either way, it sucked. I did not like that one at all.
And I don't remember which Brosnan movie it was. Maybe it was the same one. There was one, though, where Michelle Yeoh appeared.
That was Tomorrow Never Died.
Okay. And the thing that really impressed me is like, oh, wow, she's technically a Bond girl. She didn't sleep with him. Good for her.
Yep.
And I think that's the only time that's happened.
Yeah, there's usually a couple of scenes where you see him lay it on thick, and she's like, nope. I'm a spy, too. I'm immune to this crap.
Yep.
The reason why you're not sleeping with me is because I'm not seducing you. If I did it would work.
So weird. Do you know who else works?
If they tried to seduce me, it would work, and that's our listeners. Each and every one of you. And if you're feeling very strange in this next moment, it means it's working. Thank you so much for listening to the show. But we got to give a very special thanks to our exceptionally good-looking supporters on Patreon. To become a Patreon patron, go to patreon.com/AssortedCalibers podcast and sign up. Patrons get an early release of the podcast, plus bonus content like the hilarious blooper reels, the ACB film tracks, and the ACB mag dump.
Also, please remember to rate us on Apple Podcasts and Pocket Casts, subscribe to us on the platform of your choice, and share the show with your friends, both online and off.
You can get more from my blog, which is weerdworld.com. That's WEERDworld.com. And hear me weekly on Handgun Radio on the Firearms Radio Network.
And you can get more from me at linktree/Aaron Paulette. That's linktree.ee/Aaron Paulette, all one word.
And thanks to Nate Spencer for our music.
Weer'd survived his colonoscopy, so he's going to have to find another way to die. But until that time, don't worry. As the hostess of this show, nobody does it better. Our James Bond themes are assorted, and so's our podcast. Good night, everyone.
Good night.